So I'm gonna need lots of help tonight. Neil. Yeah, I'm gonna stay at the mic because if not, I can't read my own writing. Neil called me about an hour before services and said, can you do Bible class? And I said, maybe. And I literally had my suitcase in the hand, my backpack in the other one. I had just gotten out of the truck from Abilene. It was like, yeah, I can do Bible class. And after I get this all written down, my boss calls me tonight because it's end of the month. And so he needed some last numbers. So he said, hey, I heard y'all got some rain. I said, yep. I said, there was this big boat floating by, and this guy had Noah on his shirt. I said, should I be scared? But thankfully for the rain, but everything but the two flash floods that I had to drive past on 87 coming back up just south of Post. And let me tell you, those were scary. But if you will, turn in your Bibles to Romans 12. And we're going to continue on. Tonight we're going to do verses 12 and 13. And Neil and I actually talked a little bit before this and wrote down some of his ideas, so I've expanded on them a little bit. And then once somebody gets there, if somebody would read 12 and 13 for me, and then we'll get started into this.
Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. You said the word.
To 13, next verse.
Share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality.
Okay. So this is where Neil was going to go tonight. He said, what if you were truly focused on getting to heaven? What if that was in your heart in all the things that you did? Okay, or we're working on, or we're trying to get accomplished. What if focusing on getting to heaven was the center of our universe? How would you look at these verses? And looking at these, we're going to break these up into little sections here. But again, as I said, I'm pitch hitting a little bit. So if you would help out tonight, I certainly would appreciate it. But I'm going to ask the first question. If you were truly focusing on heaven, would that make your rejoicing in hope better, stronger, greater? If you were truly focused on heaven, would rejoicing in hope, would that be better, stronger, and would you have more intent on it? Go ahead, Mark.
Rejoicing in hope. There's cause to rejoice in hope, and that can help you overcome, like it says in patient and tribulation, overcome hard things. If you're focused on that hope and really take the joy from it that God intends for us to have, really genuinely looking forward to eternity in heaven, that should help overcome all the bad things that happen.
I think so. And I think that there'll be some other things that we're going to go back into some of these verses because I'm going to ask this same question. I'll go Sydney and then I'll come over to Dana. Go ahead.
So you asked the question, if we're really striving for heaven, would it be rejoicing in hope, patient and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like all three of them, because we can hear from what God's perspective was in Scripture, meaning that if you were really striving for heaven at this moment, then, like I said, rejoicing in hope, that would kind of
Would it strengthen that?
I'm kind of having trouble explaining.
Well, no, explain it this way. Look at me. Would it make it stronger? Would you rejoice in hope even more? If heaven was your goal, would you rejoice more than had you not done it? Okay, go ahead, Dana.
I was just thinking about the letter itself and Paul writing this, that he was in prison at the time when he wrote it. And what better example did he have in that? I mean, he was awaiting to be on trial and he was still rejoicing in hope.
Yeah, and here's this uplifting portion of this letter, and yeah, how much he could have gone the opposite way, right? But he didn't. Look at the next piece here. Is your patience greater if you're focusing on heaven? And that's a question. Is your patience greater because you're focusing on heaven here? Because, like Daniel was saying, patience in tribulation, which he was going through, great tribulation, right? Go ahead, Rodney.
Well, if you're focusing on God and you're trying to put your life like Christ has put your life, you take the rejoicing because he tells us to be joyful. It's joyful to be a Christian. It may have its downside, but it's still a very joyful thing because we know we have a God that loves us, that takes care of us. So if we have patience during the tribulation that we have, his calmness and his word gives us that patience and also gives us the peace that allows us to have the patience in tribulation, knowing that this is temporary. We got better things in the future.
I agree. The temporary side of that definitely employs itself into this because it drives us to do better because we know there's a greater in the future. You look puzzled. No, you're good? All right. Do your prayers become more steadfastly if your true focus is on heaven? Do your prayers become more steadfast when you're focused on heaven? Because he says in here, he says, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer. Does your prayers become more steadfast, more true, more meaningful if you're focused on heaven? And if so, why?
They actually do become more meaningful, more,
Do they become stronger?
they actually become stronger if we put in the effort.
Yes. Absolutely. Very well said.
As he said, putting in the effort, and you come to a point where you don't think of it as effort. You're talking to God, about about your home. You're looking forward to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And why not make that part of your conversation with God all the time?
What does focusing on heaven have to do with that, though? I'll kind of play it on both sides of that. Why is focusing on heaven? Because Neil and I talked about this just a little bit this evening before this. Why is that important, and why does that change your perspective?
Because things on this earth are temporary.
Okay.
I mean, we're running a race, or we're sojourners, or we're travelers, or however you want to put it. This isn't our home. We sing a song. This is not my home. I'm looking forward to a better place. Well, that's what Christ is provided for us, a place in heaven that is better. And the temporary things upon this earth that we deal with it in a sense that as we read the Bible and we take the Word and we try to live a Christian life, it allows us to cope and deal with the tribulations here, knowing that we can brush them aside and we don't have to do as much or be as intense on those things that happen because we know we have a better place to go to, and that will be taken away and our life will be so much better.
I agree. I think that there is a richness that comes to your life once your main focus is heaven. And I think without that central core, so the second Neil and I got done, I said, Neil, I got to get off the phone. I've got to start writing. And so I started going back up through the verses. And we're going to look at some verses that we've already discussed, but we're going to look at it in this vein. Because I think that's something that we need to expand upon. And this is, he said, look, go back up to 9. He goes, because if you look at it in this thought process, that was where he was going to start his discussions tonight. So we're going to go back up a little bit. But if you have that as your central focus, I think everything changes. I think that wholly your life changes. You're going to look at prayer differently. You're going to look at servitude much differently, because there is a richness to your life that you didn't have previously without that. So I'll ask this. Do we want to take care of the saints more abundantly? And why? Why? If heaven is our desire, why do we want to take care of the saints more abundantly?
If heaven is our desire, then the question was, why do we want to care for the saints more?
Yes.
Because it's what God put us on earth to do, as His children. Like it says at the end of verse 13, practice hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just saying from like the opposite perspective. If people don't practice hospitality, then it's like, what are you doing?
Exactly. And look at treating others in that same vein of just what Sydney said. These are deep questions. I mean, you could literally dive into the deep well of probably one or two of these and we can spend all evening. But these are very thought-provoking because if we're not having heaven as our central focus, what is it? What is our central focus at that point? Where are we trying to get to? What are we striving to do? What are we attempting to do in our lives, right? If so, does that change things once we have heaven as our main focus? Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I think there obviously is a sense of urgency once you have that focus of God in your heart, that you want to get it right and you want to do it the way that God has set a pattern for us to do that. And so, those who don't have that focus on the Lord may be in and out of that. Once your true focus is there, there's a sense of urgency to grow that, to get bigger and learn more. And so, yeah, all of these things get exponentially better as you learn more.
I agree. And I think that instead of just looking at ourselves, that level of servitude that comes along with that is even more, like you said, there's more urgency to it. There are more people to focus on other than self, because we get very self-focused. Go ahead, Mark. No, but I think that Bobby, you make a good point because it will bring along that richness in your life. You will have greater things to go do. And I think focusing on people is got to be one of those that is really, really, really important for us as Christians, because what does the Lord teach us? What did He do for His apostles just before He was hung on the cross? What did He do? He washed their feet. Why? Because He taught them servitude.
I was just thinking how it enhances all your relationships with
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All stages of your life end up in a different focus once heaven is your central focus, if that helps. Any questions before we go on to the next? Mark and then Sydney. Go ahead.
Verse 13, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. Why do we care about distributing to the needs of
You
the
can't
saints?
jump ahead to my next question, Mark. Go ahead, finish, sorry.
They're our family. They're the closest people on earth to the trail we're following. And so we want to be sharing and helpful to them especially. Then it says given to hospitality. That doesn't say it's attached to any particular class of people. And then a quick peek at verse 14, it says, bless those who persecute you. So those are people who are your enemies. And he's saying, be kind and helpful to all these people. Why? Because our focus is on heaven. We want to take people with us to heaven. It's not an all for me thing. And the greatness of heaven and of being a child of God, that's for everybody. And as someone who's focusing on that relationship, you want to make it available to everybody.
Yeah, I forget what class was Tracy? I think it was like the last one or the one prior to this. I remember talking briefly about us moving. We moved a number of times, and every single time we have been abundantly blessed with a congregation. I could tell you about us first going to Ohio in the very first church we went into, and it was a disaster, absolute disaster. But then was it that evening? It was that evening that another group, small, really small, just a couple families that got together, and they were in an old barn in Ohio, and wow, to this day, they're some of our best family friends, church friends. We grew up with them. We spent time with them. We had hospitality. But at the same time, the focus was on greater things, even from that outset there. But every time we went from a congregation to another congregation to another congregation, it grew. Our friendships grew tighter. Our love for brethren grew much more abundantly. Like when we came here, this was a great group that we started out with. Well, look at it. It just keeps getting better and better and better. Why? Because of our focus. Our focus is on God. It's not on self. It's not on people. It's not on chairs. It's not on a big fancy building. It's on godly things. And it matters. It really does. Anything else on hospitality? Because I'm going to go into one other part on hospitality and then I'll move on. I couldn't have done it that well. Come on. Does your hospitality become deeper? You're already raised? Your hospitality is going to become deeper, Sydney?
I was gonna, comment on something, or it's kind of like a comment or a question or something. But,
Go ahead.
so going back a little further, to, trying to remember exactly,
Do you want to hold on to that thought until we get up to verse 9?
yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yes, I can hold on.
Okay, so we'll come back to that in just a sec. Does your hospitality become deeper once your understanding or your focus is on heaven? And if so, why?
You're seeking those opportunities
Oh, yes.
when that's your focus. You're seeking the ways that you
What kind of opportunities?
having church people in your home, and
Okay.
having people that have needs in your home,
Mm-hmm.
teaching.
Yeah.
There's just so many ways that you show hospitality.
What about our visitors? I think there's a lot of opportunity. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think not only was seeking to show hospitality, but your question has been, what does your focus do to your behavior in these particular areas?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's implicit is the level of intentionality that must be required. Because otherwise you look at rejoicing. If you have no hope, eventually in life you're going to find something to rejoice about. Tribulation, another thing that happens to you.
Yes.
It's another example of the wind that can toss you to and fro. And outside of this higher level of thinking that God has given Christians the opportunity to engage in, you're basically going to respond to that based on whatever mood you happen to be in.
Yeah.
Prayer,
That shifting wind, right?
Same thing with prayer. God calls us to constancy, or to constancy here, or steadfastness. Otherwise, what is prayer? Prayer is reserved for the highest highs and the lowest lows. The needs of the saints. If you feel like it, and this again is outside of that intentionality. Sure, you'll be generous if you have the opportunity and if you feel like it, but otherwise than not. Hospitality is the same way. I think the one underlying point that Paul gives us here is that regardless of what circumstances we might find ourselves in, regardless of our financial situation, our health situation, our mood, political, whatever
Yeah.
whatever things might be contributing to our lives, he's given us the safety of this just rock solid foundation of behavior. And I think there's a lot of comfort in that, but without being intentional, without engaging our minds in that respect, without renewing our minds,
Mhm.
as he says in verse 2,
Yes.
we don't get that. It doesn't work together the way that it's supposed to without that.
That computation or a logarithm, if you're a computer geek out there, it doesn't compute, does it?
Right.
It really doesn't work unless you have that intentionality, as Josh just said. And I think that's central to what drives us in everything. Go up to verse 9, because we looked at this pretty extensively the other day. And look at just the first point there. He says, let love be without hypocrisy. If you don't have intentionality, what happens? That's a false front. And what happens to you in terms of hypocrisy? Will you do more of it if you're not intentional?
No. You'll fall into it more because your focus is not on God, it's on the things of the earth.
Exactly.
And love has to come from deep within
Hmm.
and has to be shown. And without that, and it reminds me of, I think it's First Corinthians, it's Ephesians, and it talks about, or there's love, faith, love, and hope, or hope, love, and charity.
Okay.
Well, the one that stays forever is love.
Hmm.
Even when we go to heaven, your faith and your hope are gone because you're already there.
It's
And
proof
love
positive,
is
right?
still there because of the love of Christ.
Hmm.
So you keep that, and without that, the basis to build it upon, without that, none of this is gonna work without bringing that in and making that your base and pulling that within yourself and going from there. Without it, you don't have anything.
No, there's no foundation, is there? I think if you don't have any intentionality, Josh, that's a perfect word. I think if you do not have that level of focus, level of intentionality, that love and desire to go to heaven, it all falls apart. The whole puzzle just crumbles. But look at the second part of verse 9 where it says, abhor what is evil. How does that fit in? Does it fit in?
I think these two thoughts are the arc. Arc with a C, not K, just so we're clear. So letting love, that's agape right there. That's not
Right.
an emotional,
Right.
desirous affection or anything like that. This is a duty-bound, seeking the best interest love. Obviously, what's implicit in letting love be genuine is that you are going to hate or detest what is evil. I think the subsequent verses are what that looks like behaviorally.
Mm-hmm.
How do you exemplify? How do you have your love genuine and detest what is evil? Well, by loving one another, holding fast to what is good, outdoing one another with brotherly affection. I mean, all the things.
Doesn't that look like what, the rubber meets the road kind of thought process? How that looks, how that acts. Have you ever seen somebody that's really fake about it? Kind of raise their hands. How many people you've seen that are just fake? You just know that they're not really sincere or genuine. You can just look at it and you go, yeah, no, that's not, the boat's not floating. But you get down to these major overarching concepts here, and you get to the point where you go, I have to stand on something. I really have to be on one side of this fence or the other side of the fence. There really is no sitting in the middle. And by the way, little Revolutionary War history, little bit here for you, a little side note. Do you guys ever about was it the middle of the fence or what's the term? No, yeah, something like that. So what they would do for traders at the time during the Revolutionary War, they would pick up a section of a picket fence, and they would strap the person to it, march them through town. Something of that nature, yes. And that's actually what they would physically do. So, ouch. I'm just saying, I see white picket fences in a whole different way after that. So, but you can't sit in the middle. There really is no middle ground in this. This is either a dedication or a lack of dedication, and you'll see it immediately in people's lives. Cling to what is good. I thought this was interesting. Okay, we started this concept. We started talking about what our core belief is and how that drives us. But cling harder to what is good? How does that fit in?
Everything good comes from Christ.
Okay.
So that gives you the basis of your foundation, built upon the love that you have for one another. You want to get rid of the evil things, but you want to build it and cling to the good stuff because that's what Christ gave us. He is the good stuff.
Why?
It makes life better for you.
Yeah.
No matter which way you turn, it makes life better.
Even when you're going through what? Tribulations, right? Which is what he talks about lower in this. Even when you're going through tribulations, If you cling to what is good, you'll be stronger through that, won't you? If heaven is your core, focus, your main focus, heaven is your main focus, are you showing more kindly affection? And that's a question mark. Are you showing more kindly affection? Because that's your core. That's who you are. Are you? If so, tell me about it. Because, well, I'll go back to the class that I taught last quarter. We talked simply about just sowing the seed, right? We talked about simply just coming up and talking to somebody. It wasn't having to have all these verses memorized and we're going to hold the best sermon ever in front of this person. It was simply, hi, how are you? Why? Why do those things? Why go up and talk to a complete stranger? What's the point? Yes. And what else? What goes beyond that, Sydney? So you're right. You know, in your job, you talk to a lot of people, right? So you make a lot of people feel very welcome in your job, and I know you do. What is the next step from that?
Well, not just making people welcome, but like offering my heart to anybody who needs it.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we say in the announcements at the end of every service, like we should pray for those who are hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like I said, offering hospitality can get you 100%. If heaven is our home, the main core, then we gotta put in the effort to do whatever it takes.
Oh, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Sydney Guinan. That was amazing. Okay? I can't top that. That's awesome. We have to put in the effort with the big E, because if we don't, who will? Who's going to go sow that seed? Go ahead, Mark.
I just look at this as a logical progression point of view. So like let love be without hypocrisy is agapeo love. So like let the kind of love God has be true in you. And then when you're doing that, what are we going to do? We're going to love what God loves and hate what God hates, because that's the way God is, and we want to be like our master. And so hate what is evil, love what is good. Those are the polar opposites of having a godly character. And then be affectionate to your brethren. Well, those are people who are doing the same thing. We should be gregarious among the people of God, because we want to be in heaven. Well, what's going to be there? Well, the people of God. And so they're going to be our family. Those are the people we're most close to.
But what about when our brethren are down? Can I ask that? What happens when our brethren are down?
Well, what I was going to go on to say is, okay, well, how does this look in different settings?
Yes.
And, like hospitality, even showing kindness to those who persecute you, though they're not my brethren, we would hope that they would become. And it's a manifestation of that kindness that we learn from God, and we share amongst ourselves, and then we distribute to all the people that we meet.
Mm-hmm.
To try and expand that blessing that God gives us to everybody that God has created.
Well said, Tracy.
Well, then it's like when all hope is lost. If you read John verse 11, when it talks about Jesus and when Lazarus died. And the sisters, Mary and Martha, they said, you know, if you had been here, you could have healed him.
Mm-hmm.
But why did he wait 2 days in order to go? Because if he had gone ahead and gone right when he found out that he was sick, he could have. But what did he use that as an example? He did something that, I mean, he did miracles all the time and they saw him do these. But this went beyond what he had done so far, because he you know, waited until he had already died and had been in the tomb for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then he raised him from the dead.
it's not. And what happens when our hope here? Because we're going to have times when we get down, right? We all have health issues, or we'll have this, or we'll have that. I've seen brethren here go, the highs of highs and lows of lows. But this group right here will get in there and work. I mean, I've seen brethren very quietly do things that were just amazing. And the only thing they went is they just simply went and took care of their brother or sister. I've seen it. It works. And that person, by the way, didn't have to go do that. They desired to go do it. So, good point. Good point. Let's skip this next one. Let's go, is your diligence increasing? Now, we talked about intentionality, right? But is your diligence increasing? Because he says in verse 11, he says, not lagging in diligence. What's diligence got to do with this? Why?
When you run a race, you don't quit. When you see anything that you do, you just don't quit. You just keep plugging at it, and things will get better. One way or the other, you're going to figure it out, and your focus has to stay. Your goals have to stay the same. Because if you keep changing your goals, you're going to zigzag, and you're never going to finish anything. But if you're focusing on Christ, and you build upon the love that starts, and then you just keep building everything up on top of everything else, encouraging one another, loving one another, and diligence is just part of that. When you get down, that's why we're here, to encourage one another, to build each other up in faith, and that's the encouragement that we need when we're down to keep us going.
Okay, I'll expand on that, and that was brilliant. You have a brother or a sister, and they stumble, and they're not being diligent, and they're just having a bad time. What do we do? What's our job, if we want to call it a job? What's our job, Sydney? If somebody falls down, somebody's stumbling in their lives, what is our job? What are we supposed to do?
Our job is to encourage that person, to redirect them to their life of Christ.
Miss Sydney Guyton again, I tell you, this gal is on fire tonight. Perfect. We're to encourage them, are we not? We talked about caring for the saints more abundantly. We talked about hospitality. We talked about a lot of the sections of our life. It does all add up to what? Not just us getting to heaven. Our brother, our sister getting to heaven. And that takes intentionality. And Josh, I think that's just the most brilliant word in this. It takes that intentionality to know that, you know what? I'm going to put my focus on heaven. Number one. But number two is I'm going to bring you along with me. And I'm going to do it with love. I'm going to do it with diligence. I'm going to do it with a deep faith. Why? Because I want you there with me in the long term. That's why. And it's very, 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 very important. Because I don't ever want to look across that void, and I'll come back to you, Dave, in just a sec. I don't want to look across the void and see that other person when I knew I could have had and done something for them, said something, cared for them, loved them, did whatever they need to get them across the line. Because I know that they're going to turn around. If I'm working that hard for them, hopefully they're going to work that hard for me. Go ahead, David.
This is a word nerd alert.
Uh-oh.
I know Josh will like it, maybe. We talked about hospitality, and I'm looking at the word. It's a combination of two Greek words of it's philoxenia, which is phileo and xenio, love of brethren, or brotherly love, and xenia, which means foreign, or foreigner, foreign. So love of strangers. Whenever we think of hospitality, we mostly think of inviting our brothers over and
Bless you.
if it's involves more than just that, if it really does mean strangers, our culture, we're not like Arabs. You come into their tent and they protect you, you know, and they're very hospitable, from what I understand the culture. Our culture's not like that. We draw the curtains when we get home, close the door.
But how should we act? How should we act? Because we do that. I mean, we go home, we shut the door, we close. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, okay, so I see coming down from verse 10, okay, preferring your brethren, why? Because we're on the same trail as heaven. Verse 11, not lagging in diligence. This is a prayer of polar opposites. Not lagging in diligence, but fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Okay, so what are you going to do? What are we going to do? Do it with all your heart. Be fervent about it. Don't be a feet dragger. And then on down, it has the sort of triple horn admonition to distribute to the saints in need, to show hospitality, and as David said, that really means, like the word is referring to strangers. So be kind and helpful to those of your brethren. Be kind and helpful to those who are strangers, and even be kind and helpful to those who are your enemies. It's broadening the view of all the ways that we can be fervent in spirit and serve the Lord.
You stole my fire again, by the way.
Well, and I think
Just so you know.
there's an implication too, you know, to what David said. Culturally, that's not how we are. And I think, and I don't know if this is an American thing, a 2022 thing. I don't know, but there's a lot more involved with honoring God that has to do with how we treat other people than there is what we do when we're sitting at the church building or even sitting at our homes or in our homes
Yes.
with our families.
Yes.
And I think culturally, it's been easier for us historically to really zero in on making sure that we have the church building stuff nailed down and that we've got the home stuff nailed down. But I wonder if we haven't cast some of this relational stuff maybe a little bit to the wayside. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but just
No, but in fact, you were downstairs with the young ones last quarter. So up here, we were talking to our neighbors, and one of the main effects of it was, hey, look, you're going to be in the grocery line, you're going to be here, you're going to be there, and simply going and talking to someone is still kind of foreign today. It still is. It's still hard for us to kind of get out of that shell, break out, and go, hi, how's your day? To a total stranger. That's not common for us. It should be more common for us because that's so in the Word. That's getting the Word out there. Is it always going to be having a verse in mind? No. But it is going to be about how we break down barriers in order to talk to someone. Sydney, I'll come back to you in just a sec. David had his hand up.
I blame our neglect in hospitality on our prosperity. We have mobility. We go wherever we want when we want to go. We have prosperity. We got the money to buy, to do, the entertainment. And I think it's a handicap to our.
I'll argue with you.
Okay.
I'll say it's a handicap in terms of us not having enough fervence in spirit. I don't care how much you have. I don't care if you got 2 pennies in your pocket or 2 million in your pocket. I don't care. I don't think the prosperity can drive that. But if your core is not getting to heaven, if your core is not focusing on Rodney said, on Christ, then no matter what prosperity you have, what things you have, that will always get in the way. I think that there's a functional drawing line there that has to be made that says, look, the things will get in the way if the main thing is not the focus. And that if that fervent spirit is not your focus.
I agree, but there's still there is a functional barrier when the principles of Christianity line up with the
Yes.
You know, it was a cultural expectation that if there was a traveler coming through town, he could go knock on any door that he wanted, and that family would take him in, provide him food, clothing, shelter, whatever he needed. Within Christianity, we're still supposed to maintain that love of strangers. However, the cultural expectations are different, so it does feel more foreign to us.
It does, and I agree. I think there's that part of that functional part of that.